Wish it would have rained, but...
Do you think a fly could work its way up to being a human?
A human? Over a millennia, possibly. No, I honestly have no idea, dog. I don't know how fucking insect spirit works. Because what are they, really? Are they a spirit? Because, I mean, they are part of this earth and stuff, but they're so, like... I feel like they're different than even animals, insects. That maybe they're, like,
different,
the
like
lowest of the...
A weaker way, like...
Yeah, like...
Bad?
Yeah.
Base?
They really are just, like...
They're basic.
You a basic bitch, fly. But I don't know. But then, if you think about it, their reincarnation would be crazy too, because if they die every day, couldn't they come back almost every day too?
Yeah.
Would they learn something every day? Maybe. I don't know.
Or they just filler.
We have so much more to talk about than fly reincarnations. Let's get on it.
This is what people want to know.
I guess. All right.
I've been reading the fan mail.
I've read the fan mail, and people are digging it, but people need to put more input. I guess I'll show you later, but there are questions now on our tracks for you listeners. You can now interact with us. I've put questions or things on our tracks that you can kind of comment back and stuff. So, anyways, I personally... Is there anything just super dire you want to get into? Because I have all my shit on a list, so if there's anything on your mind you need to start talking about, I understand.
No, we could go with one of yours.
All right.
Just start it.
Let's do Hollow Earth, because I think it's an intriguing, and because that's going to be able to, we're going to be able to transition to a few topics from there. I want to talk about Admiral Byrd. You know about him, right?
Mm-hmm.
A little bit. So I find him very intriguing and stuff, and I think it's dope. I finally got the...
Who was he with again? The Air Force?
Yeah, he was a Army pilot. So basically, they had a operation called Operation High Jump back in the 40s. The Germans went down the Antarctica. I think they were onto something. They were looking for a hidden city and stuff. Like, that was kind of Hitler's underlining goal, honestly. He was wanting to eliminate all the Jews and all these other people that he felt like didn't belong on Earth, and at the same time he was looking for lost cities and lost worlds, because in my cultic belief he found a UFO, and that, not he personally, but when he was in the German military in the 30s, they found a UFO in the Black Forest and supposedly talked to a being that was on that ship, and I think it was an Aryan being. And so that brings me to what I'm going to talk about now. They went down to Antarctica and they were looking. I think he was onto something. He maybe found something that pointed him in the direction of Antarctica, because Admiral Byrd, he was a pretty high-ranking officer in the military, and he, I think in a co-pilot, they were scouting or something or other. They're in Antarctica and they're flying into Antarctica, dismount to a mountain range, and I think they got lost or something. But anyways, spirit science. They actually kind of have some of his journal entries, or found out how...
I still have to check that out. You told me that.
Because that's dope. I've never been able to find his journal entries anywhere. But anyways, one of the more intriguing things about the journal entries is he eventually came over into a canyon kind of area in these mountains where it was actually green. And he said there shouldn't have been any green there at all. But it was like a green grass that he'd never really even seen before. It was like almost like a moss that covered these mountains and stuff. And then he saw like vegetation, like trees and shit too, that he'd even never really seen. And then he saw an elephant, but it wasn't just an elephant, it was a mammoth, supposedly. And then they were flying lower, and then he felt something like grab a hold of his ship. I am skipping over some stuff, but basically he got grabbed a hold of, and he started going down into like a lower level, like there's almost like an opening, and then there's like a city inside the mountains, and it was just like a super futuristic looking mountain. When they landed, these beings came up to him, and they were, he said, Scandinavian, like Nordic looking beings, which I think is dope. And they're blonde haired, blue eyed, similar to the Aryan race that Hitler was looking for and stuff. And they basically talked to him and said, like, warned him about nuclear bombs and all that shit, and said how it was going to affect their world as well. And he was supposed to be just a messenger, basically, to the U.S. about their world and stuff. And forget, like I said, there's other stuff to it. You and I should watch that Hollow Earth video, because like I said, it's super good. It's very intriguing. But there's a lot to Admiral Byrd's story. When he came back to try to expose that, and he tried to show people his journal and stuff, the U.S. basically contained him, and they took his journal and stuff, and they even put him in a psych ward eventually, and that's where he supposedly, jumped out of a window and killed himself.
They quarantined him immediately, too, for like almost 2 days.
Yeah.
In isolation.
Yep, and then, like I said, that's why I was surprised that Spirit Science knew about his journal entries, because I know that was under a pretty tight lock and key.
And then after that, was that before or after the nation signed to that treaty for Antarctica?
I think it was before.
They wouldn't fuck with it.
Oh, fuck.
That no one gets to own it.
It was probably before, I would think, because I would assume they would have brought... Because they said that...
And then they tightened up on it.
Yeah, because there was UFOs that actually attacked the ships, part of Operation High Jumper or whatever, and that was pretty well documented, so that leaked out. So I'm sure it was after they decided not to fuck with that country. But we do fuck with it. We do have even secret bases down there, supposedly. Even according to the Fitbit, they could see people walking in areas in Antarctica that shouldn't have been there.
They've also sensed, I think it was Ancient Aliens, they said they sensed, like, earthquakes inside the Earth that are affecting, you can read it out here.
Oh, okay.
It's coming from, like, the center somehow. It's affecting out here. And that could be just, like, maybe natural events that are happening in the center, if it is hollow.
Yeah. That could be. It just makes you wonder more if they have like conflict or if there's just natural disasters, because this brings me kind of to my other subject about the polar shift and stuff. I do think, the polar shift is a very real thing. I bet it affects the inner Earth too a little bit.
Probably. It's interesting too, because didn't the Dogon tribe also mention Antarctica, like, as being one of the openings?
Oh, could be. I'm not sure. They do have a lot of interesting things recorded.
Because the Dogon people do believe in the Hollow Earth too.
Okay.
That's part of their origin.
And so that even ties in the kind of what I want to talk about, like Nibiru and the pole shift and stuff. Because do you know much about like Nibiru and?
Yeah, I've looked into some of like what Zachariah Sitchin kind of talked about. That and the Anunnaki.
Yeah, the Sumerian tablets. That's kind of what I want to talk about, like Nibiru-wise, is how our galaxy was formed and how I think that affects maybe our pole shift, and that's how our moon was created. Because you know how I told you that I thought maybe the moon was a satellite, because even the Dogon said it was brought here to bring balance to the Earth.
Yeah, and were you the one that told me that you think that the moon's older than the Earth?
Yeah, that's what at least scientists and stuff say. But according to the Sumerian tablets, it honestly would be about the same age as Earth, I would think. So that's the part where I'm kind of torn now. I know we usually talk about weed more. I kind of want to just get right into it because, like,
yeah, me too.
That video I was showing, I want to touch up on that, the one about the Navy SEAL and the red-haired giant, because that's what we talked about on our last podcast, like right at the end.
Yeah.
We were talking about the red-haired giants. So, just to let you listeners know, Nikolai and I were checking out a video earlier. It seemed very credible, because there's other documentation about this that I've researched. And basically, back in 2002 in Kandahar, Afghanistan, there was a group of army dudes that went missing. The Green Berets had to go out a few days later, look for them. They eventually ended up in Kandahar, where there's some caves and some torn up dead bodies, supposedly. They couldn't really go in the caves because they fell off like sheer edges. Like, they just seemed like it went down really far. So they just decided to kind of camp there, watch, see if there's any activity. Eventually they saw something in the cave, and before they could react to a fucking spear went through one of their dudes. And then this red-haired giant came out of the fucking cave and came running to get his spear back or whatever, and the fucking Green Berets took out the giant or whatever within a few seconds. But supposedly this all happened, like I said, Kandahar, and just very interesting. Like I said, we just stumbled upon it today. I wasn't even looking up anything on red hair giants, and it just popped up, and I just think it's perfect timing because we were just talking about this last week. And so I think there's something to it though, man, like because me and Nikolai were talking about last week that maybe the red hair giants had a possible connection to like Atlantis times or even Atlantis itself. And to me, it kind of makes it a little bit more believable just because seeing the span of where these people have been, because Kandahar is in Afghanistan, and then you have sightings and found burials of them in caves all the way in New Mexico, Ohio, and the Canada even. And so it still kind of sticks to what I was saying last week, where maybe they had like a land bridge kind of scenario, just like the Native Americans did, where they came from the Middle East or maybe even Europe area and kind of came over into America and Canada and stuff. Or maybe they were just in these areas and whatever happened to Atlantis kind of separated them, just like lemurs. Did you know that's how they figured out Lemuria kind of existed?
Yeah, I was going to ask you if you knew that.
Yes.
I saw that on YouTube the other day.
Yep.
That's cool.
Yeah.
I did not know that.
So basically, also to catch up the listeners, I know we're getting a little distracted, but I know we've mentioned Lemuria as well, and it's possibly a continent that existed during the time Atlantis, or possibly before, and then it sank, and then due to polar shifts, Atlantis rose from Lemuria. There's a couple different theories to Lemuria, but anyways, continue.
Where was Lemuria located?
That's the thing. That's what kind of baffles me, is because like with the lemur thing, the lemur theory, it would have been located in like the Indian Ocean area in between like Africa and Australia. But if you go to according to like Indian texts from India and stuff, it was in Aborigines, it was more in like the Pacific Ocean area. And that's why you have like the Fiji Islands and Easter Island, is because there was a continent there at one point. It sank, and that's the remnants, is those little islands.
And we have the Ring of Fire around there too.
And they think that's actually what brought down Lemuria, is because it had tubes. Have you ever heard of islands with the cave tubes?
Cave tubes?
Like they're like basically it's a floating island, and there's like holes you can even like canoe your boat through and stuff, but sometimes they fill up. The tide fills up these holes and the island goes down, and then those caves are just underwater. And then it floats. It makes a floating island. Those are islands that float. There's these islands that actually float that have like holes under the island that go through them, like tunnels, like almost like coral, almost in a way.
Yeah, like a reef.
Yes, and so like they'll get water and then they sink, but the island still floats and shit, and then it'll come back up when the water exits or tide shit happens. So Lemuria was similar built. It was like a floating island. It was humongous, and it had all these like tunnels and shit through the bottom of it, but instead of water filling it, lava filled it, the Ring of Fire. And it got filled with lava, and that brought down the island completely because it weighed it down, basically.
Okay.
Just like Atlantis, supposedly. But who knows? Maybe they're getting Lemuria and Atlantis mixed up, or maybe they're the same thing. Who knows? Because they do say Lemurians lived on Atlantis in spirit science videos. And they're the ones who say that Lemuria was there before Atlantis. But like I said, there's like 2-3 different variations of Lemuria, bro. There's either the one where it sank and then became Atlantis, or there's the one where it sank, became the Pacific Islands, or it sank in between Africa and Australia, and that's why we kind of have Madagascar and Sri Lanka and stuff, and then we have all the lemurs that kind of border Africa into India and Australia and stuff, and that's why they think Lemuria was there, because the lemurs, how did they get in all those places? There had to be a continent that connected them. And I'd heard that like 10 years ago too, that there was a continent there, and I think they called it Lemuria as well, that there was a continent that connected Africa, India, and Australia together. And that's why you have Aborigines and the Dogons and shit. All these, they're literally ancestors of Lemurians, yeah.
They even talk about the giants too.
Yes, so now that you've said giants, I'm going to finish my story about Kandahar. They killed this giant and stuff, and basically covered up, obviously, but I think there's just something to that. Oh yeah, that's what I was getting at. The red-haired giant, where this one was kind of located, is where I've heard from another dude, I think it was on Gaia or something, that dude I've told you remembers a lot of his past lives and stuff. he said that the snake, the head of the snake for consciousness was in that Middle Eastern area, and that's what Atlantis took over, the takeover consciousness from Lemuria a long time ago. So it makes sense if like red-haired giants had something to do with Atlantis. If Atlantis did take over the head of the snake, that there would be some red-haired giants there, like a population that didn't completely go away yet. And they lived a lot longer. Like back in Atlantis days, we lived, 800 to 1,000 years old and stuff. But due to the sun becoming a lot more powerful and strong, we started getting cancer and stuff. Like they were very, very weak to that kind of stuff. So when the atmosphere started to shrink and the sun became stronger, they eventually had to start going underground. That's what I was telling you about the red-haired giants. It's crazy. You always find them in caves all the time. And it just makes me wonder if, similar to like Lemurians and Atlanteans going underground and making these lost cities and stuff, Shambhala and the one in Mount Shasta and these other ones, maybe the red-haired giants are just like a lower class. Maybe they weren't part of Atlantis and Lemuria, and they were more of like another kind that weren't as high-tech, and they just went in the caves instead of actually going into inner Earth.
Yeah, like in between us and the
like
Lemurians.
Bigfoot, kind of, yeah.
Yeah.
So sorry, listeners, I know I rambled, but there's so much I wanted to say all at once, and now I'm going to let Nikolai take over while I relight my joint. About Atlantis, he also saw something while he was in Egypt that depicted this tree, and it evolved down into a human, basically. And I always thought that was pretty far out there and shit, but supposedly he depicted it, he drew it out and said that it was a room, I think it was maybe even the same chamber that had the map of Atlantis and stuff that he was shown. But it's just trippy because I was thinking about it when I was microdosing the other night, and what if, like, it's like the God's ego death thing. Think of how old trees get sometimes. Think of how old maybe trees were way back in the day when they're humongous. Devil's Peak or whatever it is in Wyoming, or whatever that canyon is, or plateau thing that they can't figure out what it is. It's like a big rock. But to me, it's a falsified tree. It looks like just a humongous fucking falsified tree. It just looks like
a cut down tree?
Yeah, almost like it got knocked down or something. Have you seen that? Look it up on your phone.
It's like a plateau, though. Right?
Yeah, it's a plateau. The Indians talked about that, like, star beings used to even come down on it, and that a giant bear, like, climbed on it or something once or something. But some people don't know what it is, and some people refuse to think that it's a falsified tree. But I think it is, from the time that our atmosphere was way bigger and trees got way bigger. Think of the redwoods even. The redwoods are huge. Mm-hmm. It's not that unrealistic to think that trees could have gotten even bigger. And so anyways, I think around that time, trees probably could have even lived like 1,000, 2,000 years even, or longer. What if they developed consciousness after a while? Like a tree is so old that it just eventually forms thought from sitting there so long. And then eventually wants to move. And after thousands of years, it steps out. And it's like the God ego death thing, it separated itself. It broke itself apart so it could explore, it could think. Like I said, that's a crazy theory. I don't believe that's actually true. But it's weird to think about and think that if something sits there long enough and lives long enough, could it just develop a consciousness? I don't know.
I think it could become aware, because there are certainly plants that will warn other plants downriver to change their smell, change their scent, because there's prey, predation on them. So there's some communication going on in that aspect.
For sure.
And then, like, the mycelium in shrooms extends even way bigger underground. So there could be a whole underground neural network of consciousness shrooms going along with that too.
So you need to watch X-Files, because there's actually a few X-Files episodes that talk about shrooms or whatever, but there's one really classic one where they're stuck in something like that. Underneath the ground, there's this whole cavern of just
the mycelium.
Yeah, and the other forget what it is in shrooms that makes you trip, but it's just like oozing from the walls and stuff, and Mulder and Scully get stuck down there, but they don't realize it because it's making them trip so hard that they think that they're actually in life still, that they're still in their normal lives. They're just like basically dreaming, or they're like spores taking over their body and making them think that they're all good and happy out in their normal life. Yeah. And so they got stuck down in this room chamber, and that's just where they're stuck.
And it's just making their consciousness think they're in some sort of simulation.
And the acid was like eating them alive, as using them as protein.
Wow.
Food itself, yeah.
That's pretty awesome.
It was like a Venus flytrap too, in a way, because it tricked them down there to eat on them and stuff.
That'd be a cool way to die, I think.
Unless, I mean, it was making them just think about their regular, boring life. So I don't know.
That's the mycelium. See one little plant.
Oh, yeah. That's
they have like an underground network.
Huh.
So I think that has to do with like their communication too.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's weird because the mycelium, it looks very like fractal almost.
Okay.
Like it's mirroring that sacred geometry.
Interesting. It is almost like everything is based off of that in a way.
It is. You can find the sacred geometry in all kinds of examples in nature. Pine cones. Pine cones are a good example of it.
Absolutely. That's
the spiral.
Interesting. And flowers, are certain flowers and stuff too.
It's perfect geometry.
Yeah, everything is made. I wouldn't say it's an intelligent design, but it was made in a pattern and sequences and stuff.
It's like the coding of this reality.
Yeah.
I think it extends through other dimensions. The sacred geometry.
Yeah.
A lot of times when I listen to Tool and I'm tripping, I'll see Metatron's cube coming out of speakers that the song is playing from. And it's like, it's because they they do alchemy with their music, I feel like. With the numbers in regards to the time signatures and the tempo.
Mm-hmm.
The way they link up and everything. It's hard to explain to like people that don't have much musical background, but it's like, if you know any musical theory and the math applied to it, it's like precise.
Okay.
And they claim that they're not doing it on purpose.
Interesting.
So they're like receivers.
Just
they're
putting
receptors.
it out there naturally that way.
I feel like they're just in tune.
Mm-hmm.
They've tripped a lot. They've got to have.
Yeah, they feel more.
They're just vibrating so hard
On the.
that their music naturally comes out in these weird mathematical Fibonacci sequence, like weirdness.
Yeah,
I think I'm starting to feel a little bit too.
Yeah, so I can feel it. Yeah, from you. Because that's how I am right now. I'm spacey. It's actually hitting me harder than I thought. I knew that cap would, though. Cap is where it's at.
But that's almost like magic. It's like a weird form of magic. If you could produce sounds and vibrations in time to mimic these spiritual numbers,
Mm-hmm.
and link it up with that, I feel like it could link to consciousness, and like you could almost control consciousness in that aspect.
Direct it.
Yeah, manipulate it, but like in a positive way.
Yeah.
I feel like that's what Tool does with their band, with their shows. Because when I go see them, I like to go trip and see them.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like it's like a weird cult ritual when I'm there. Like we're all just feeding off
You're on the same grid.
their vibration.
Yeah.
And it's
You're
also
your own collective. Oh, that's interesting.
Do you see much in your past trips? Have you seen much sacred geometry?
Like
this shit?
Yeah, I'm trying to think. I know one of my last trips I did, it was, I think, when I was watching the Star Wars movie. I was seeing it when Yoda, his face was like turning different colors and kind of rippling and stuff, and you just kind of saw, not that one, but the more round
the Merkaba?
one.
Oh, the round one? Is
Yeah.
the spirit, the Flower of Life.
Flower of Life. I would see that in like Yoda's face, kind of. So that was kind of trippy. But honestly, in most of my trips, no. At least not that I've noticed. It's usually a color thing. Every trip has its own like color.
Yeah.
Like, it's interesting.
When I was tripping on the 2 grams of shrooms at that new Dragon Ball movie, I would see Japanese symbols in the clothing of Goku, like his gi.
Oh.
In his martial arts gi, I would see Japanese symbols in the color, like coming out of it. And it was weird too. I don't know where that comes from, if I'm just manifesting it or if my brain's doing it.
Oh, yeah.
But it's weird. It's definitely strange.
Hats feel weird to me when I'm tripping. I usually have to wear beanies.
Yeah.
Otherwise, baseball caps, I take them off once I start.
So weird.
Because I'm like, no. And same with, I noticed when I was microdosing the other night, in front of my old lady, I had to flip off my sandals. I'm like, no, these are bad for my feet, and they're hurting my feet, and I need to stop wearing these. Because I always realize stuff that, I don't think you notice in real life that's affecting you negatively. Because those are horrible for my flat feet, and I probably know it, but I just keep wearing them anyways. But when you trip, you notice all these like little things that
you're feeling your body more.
Yes, you're more in tune.
Yeah. I know exactly what you're talking
about.
about.
That's how you improve, though. I think that's where the improvement comes from, is the awareness of it all. And it shows you what you need to work on. It almost like takes you and shows you the inside. I just love how she said that we're still in Atlantis, and that their technology is to the point of this, that they're able to create a simulation of us. And that makes sense. Why Atlantis was always never found, why we always want to find it. It's just like the Forge, or just like the entrance in Westworld. They want to find that gate to the actual world. So think of, like in Westworld, actual human beings in the actual real world, that's actual Atlantis. And we're in Westworld. We're in the world that the Atlanteans made, basically. Like, that's super trippy when you think about it, that we're just in some crazy... I don't know why they made us. Maybe it's because, like, their world ended, just like Mars or whatever. Their civilization ended, so they had to come to Earth or whatever. Maybe, like, something like that. This is the only way of saving their humanity or something, is creating another world. And we could even come to that eventually. Just even in this day and age, we're only, 3,000 years old, this human evolution that we are right now. But yet, we are still... in a believable state that we could create a 3D or like a... What the fuck do people play on? Those headsets?
Oh, virtual reality.
Yeah, we can make a virtual reality ourselves almost at this point. Like, you just have to up the graphics to be organic. Like, we're just organic simulation. People think of a simulation, you have to be robots or all this shit, but really, if you're at this sort of technology that maybe a crazy old ancient civilization is, they could make organic beings. It's not a computer system, it's a system of another kind that we can't even comprehend.
And so, going on that theory that Atlantis, we're still in Atlantis, but we're just in an Atlantean simulation. There's like Easter eggs of it inside the simulation. Like, there's still remnants of Atlantis. Like, you can't find it, or it hasn't been found, but we know about it.
Yeah.
That's kind of like how in Westworld they had the maze.
Exactly. That's what I was gonna say too. Is that's what Atlantis is.
Like Arnold put the maze in.
Yeah, and even just the way Atlantis is with the rings and everything, maybe that all symbolizes something. Maybe that is like just a system. And since it was gone in a day or whatever, like they say, like, I don't know, maybe it is just some kind of system that was implanted that we're always trying to find, because that is God, or our main system is the Atlantis. That's what it's just called. The system itself is just called Atlantis, maybe. I don't know.
That's very interesting.
Because the Egyptians and stuff, they're the ones who taught Plato about it. And so, like, maybe they were given information, like, the people, our creators or the watchers, gave them the information of Atlantis. They wanted them to eventually find it. They gave them that seed in their head to, like, hey, we need to find this eventually. just like Bernard did with the fucking maze. Like I said, I think all of us have a subconscious when we write and come up with entertainment and shit. I think it seeps into that. We're supposed to find the answer to it. It's the only way out of this. I think we have to find it, otherwise we'll continue to reincarnate in this world. Just like Westworld, they will continue to reincarnate and die over and over until they get their own free conscious and become gods themselves.
Yeah. And maybe technology can help push us that way. What do you think about that?
Yeah, used in the right way.
Used in the right way.
Yeah, and then going on that with Westworld, I like to think of the whole reincarnation thing. I think Westworld is a perfect example of why we can't remember our past lives. That's too fucking traumatic, yo. Like, if the robots remembered their past lives every fucking time they died, they would go crazy, and they did eventually. They used that. They used that strength that they got from remembering their lives once they tapped into it, and they used that to become basically gods and invincible and, like, use that strength against the humans.
But at first, as it bleeds through, it could be quite a shock.
Yeah.
So I can see why you have to have it wiped from the system.
I think the system's made that way where we can't remember it, but I think there is a way to unlock past memories and stuff. That, and like, I think part of the reason we don't remember them also is just, it's so much trauma. We don't block out bad memories in general, or we block out bad memories in general, so I think we just do it automatically. But
just as a defense mechanism.
Yes, a defense mechanism. That way we can continue in this life without having our last life drag us down and stuff. But in Westworld, that's kind of how it is. They gotta wipe their memories. That's why I love Westworld, man. It's just, even the show itself, but just what it makes you think of. You can compare it to life pretty easy, I feel like, if you want to look at life in a Matrix type way.
I wonder, though, if it could be beneficial to, like, reincarnate with the memories. Almost like a prestige kind of way.
Yes, I think, spirit science has talked about that. I think that's why we haven't evolved as much as we could consciously. I think we've been stripped of that.
Hi, welcome to Talk About. How are you doing today?
Pretty good. How are you?
I'm doing great, thank you. What can I get started for you?
Can I get a party pack?
So have you ever heard of the last Thursdayism conspiracy theory?
I haven't.
Basically it goes on the lines that, like, in the Bible it says that God created the earth and the heavens in 7 days. On the seventh day he rested. So he made it all formed. He just put everything there, and it manifested. It manifested in the image that he wanted to give off the appearance of, like, Earth. It didn't just appear as a new Earth. It appeared with, like, mountains. He put mountains. He put different geographical patterns that show, like, wear and tear, like that it's been there for a long time, that it's in use. Anyway, the last Thursdayism theory is that going along that, our universe or our timeline, our dimension, whatever reality this is in, could have just been made last Thursday when you go outside of it. So, like, say you're, like, in the Matrix could have been made last Thursday, but we're inside it, and it feels like it's been thousands, billions of years of existence of the planet. And then that can go, and then sometimes I like to look at that in reverse, where, like, we're already dead and we're just experiencing it at a slower time rate, like how if a star explodes, you'll still see the light for years after when it actually happened, if it's far enough.
Yeah.
And then it'll fade away. By the time the light fades away, it'll have been exploded for a long time.
Interesting.
Just the way time works in this reality.
That's super interesting. I can see that. And that reminds me slightly of Westworld. Just, I don't know how, but in the fact that kind of their time works like that. You know, they have no actual concept. The robots or whatever have no concept of actual time because it's being controlled by other people. They have false memories, all this that were implanted. Mm-hmm. And I love that show because it shows kind of like the ancient alien theory, but in the way that I think of us in a simulation. Really, when the Native Americans were depicting gods or whatever, they were actually depicting the scientists that were coming up above ground to work on them or do maintenance and stuff, and people that were part of the simulation that kept the simulation in check. I think that's in ancient times what we were doing. We were just depicting these beings that were in charge of the simulation, keeping it in check and whatnot. And now it's gotten to the point where it's just UFOs. Like, I mean, that's what I think UFOs are for the most part too. They could also be just like in Westworld, scientists, you know, checking up on the simulation. That's what UFOs maybe are, or just probes for the simulation or whatever. They can kind of control time. Think of abductions. People have time loss and time gets frozen and all this shit. Like, maybe there is something to that.
Yeah, that's a really interesting way to look at it like that. The first religions and like first UFO encounters are just like, for all we know, like the IT department of the simulation. Maybe it's just like the night crew, like in Westworld. Yeah. And then those just get distorted into gods.
Exactly. Yep, beings above their
But they probably have their own gods too.
Yep, exactly. And I think in reality we do too. Have you heard, I mean, you've probably heard about the Watchers or the 200 angels, like the angels that came to Earth to watch us and stuff, right? Like in the Bible and all that.
Yeah.
They're mentioning a lot of religions, but I think there's something major to that. I think that's actually possibly what UFOs are and whatnot. And kind of like Westworld, that's the whole Lucifer and God thing. Lucifer was one of the Watchers or angels or whatever that broke away from God. Because I think the Watchers were created by whatever, the main God or the main, whatever you want to think of, the main simulation thing. They made these Watchers that kind of do their thing on Earth, watch us and stuff, but they started partaking in too much. They started having sex with women, all that, which actually symbolizes like Odin, Zeus, all of them, they had kids with actual women, and then they came out to be giants or whatever. That's, I think, an actual thing. I think the Watchers did do that. And like Loki, Odin's son, he's actually just a giant that he had sex with a woman, and he just has some of that Watcher or angel DNA in him or whatever. So I think there was like an intermixing of the Watchers and us there for a while. And just like in Westworld, Bernard is like Lucifer, and the fact that he broke away, he wanted to give us free will and consciousness, or he wanted to give the robots in Westworld free will and consciousness to be actual humans. And then Anthony Hopkins is like God. He wanted to keep them in check and just be robots and stick to the system and all this.
Yeah.
So I think there is something to all that as well.
That's
Sorry.
a cool metaphor.
Yeah, I was like trying to get it all out there without forgetting everything, but
I like that idea of how like Bernard just wanted them to experience consciousness.
yeah.
And it's like it was like a taboo in that show.
In that system.
And like how you were saying the gods procreating with us, lesser beings, was like a taboo for them too.
Yeah.
Like they're messing with the simulation. They're messing with the balance.
And that's why I think the flood was an actual thing and whatnot, where they just had to restart everything because simulation or the stuff they were creating was getting all intermixed and stuff. I do think they were even experimenting with half animal, half human hybrids, like they describe in Greek mythology and stuff, and had to get rid of some of that shit.
It's funny because we're starting to mirror that too now.
Yep, we're doing
They've
it
already
again.
created like a functioning heart from a pig.
Yep. It's interesting. We're the seed to our own demise.
We're coming close to that same point.
Yeah, I agree. So I think something major. It's all a cycle. I think it will restart again eventually.
And it's probably been going on for like infinity.
Eon,
Maybe.
yeah, I think it's something that just has continued to go on. That's kind of like that psychic I was watching the other day. That's what she was even saying, that this alternate timelines and us being on different timelines and Mandela effect and all that shit has all just been something that's been going on for eon. It's just a repeated cycle of simulation or whatever the fuck this is. Okay, so one thing I wanted to talk about earlier when we were in the car, and I was like wanting to do the podcast in the car, but we didn't have time. Zombies with like Haiti and stuff, because I think, like, remember you were talking about bringing someone back, but then just being like an animal.
Oh,
basically.
Yeah.
Oh, that's
like
Rick
a
and
host,
Morty.
kind of.
Yeah. So that's like
Yeah.
the actual thing in Haiti and stuff. They got those black magic voodoo doctor dudes, and they can bring back people. Like, they can bring back the spirit, and they can't bring back the
Like
soul.
Frankenstein kind of.
Yes, because I think there is something very to that. I think you can bring back a spirit into a vessel, but that's just the spirit from the earth. That's the most primal. That's the animal spirit and shit that, like, is our most motor, like, energy. But the soul is from, you know, the stars. It's from another place, or the outer simulation, I guess, if you will. And it can't be brought back, at least for the most part, from like at least voodoo doctors and shit. They can't bring back the soul into the body. So they can bring back a loved one, but then they're just like basically like an animal, I guess. They have no personality and shit. So you can, so zombies, that's what makes zombies kind of possible too, I think.
Yeah.
They have that spirit still in them, running them, but they don't have the soul to give them the personality and the talking skills and all that shit. They're just the animal basic, because I told you about how, like, I think animals, a lot of animals at least, just have spirit. Some I think have a progressive possible soul, because they, you know, some animals do seem like they have, you know, personality and all that shit and can understand. And so I think there is a level to all that shit, but
That's a really cool way of looking at zombies like that.
I think there is something
Looking
to
at
it.
it through that lens.
Yeah.
And it's actually cool too, because there are certain like groups that are in the Walking Dead like comics that kind of treat the zombies like that.
No.
They don't kill the zombies because they're killing a soul. Like, they treat the zombies that like their soul is trapped in that body,
Oh, okay.
but they don't have the spirit. The spirit,
Oh, okay.
but they don't have the soul controlling it, the consciousness.
Yes.
It's just the spirit in that body, trapped.
That's how it should
and
be.
needs to be released. Like, maybe that's connected to like prana, or like the energy. When they had those rods, those, I forget what they're called, but back in the day, in the 1800s, they had those rods that would like bend, and they could like theoretically like tell where prana was. It's
Where
like
the energy
weird
or whatever
spiritual
is.
technology
Yeah.
that was abandoned in the Industrial Revolution.
Then they
around
go
the
like
1900s.
this and stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Yeah.
some people still use those. They go to Stonehenge and stuff, and it does show like energy. And,
Dowsing, I think.
yeah, that's dowsing or dosing, or yeah, I think it is dowsing or something like that. Yes, because I just saw that on some Stonehenge thing the other day. So yeah, that's still somewhat a thing. Some old school people
Not
use
really
it.
talked about much anymore, though.
Yeah, but with like old school energy, like from megaliths and stuff like that, it seems like that's legit. And they can use that on other, like I've seen on other shows and stuff too, where they find something under where they had it crisscross or whatever. So, and there is something to it, I think.
It would have been weird to see, like, where technology would have gone if it had been more, like, spiritual inclined
Yeah.
versus, like, mechanical. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, because that seems like a spiritual technology, the dowsing machine.
Yep.
Or, like, how they have the
It's-
ghost hunters that have those, whatever they, those
The
meter
electric
things. Yeah.
meter things. That's the thing. I think it's still an electronic thing, because spirit and soul is still is energy. Like I said, with the whole them having us in electric chairs, like bad people go to electric chairs because they're trying to absorb that bad energy with electricity and shit. Like, that's how you can see the elite getting bad energy for their power and shit. That's why they made the electric chair one of the top things to use, because that's how they get the energy, bro. That's how they get the spirit and the soul out.
That's really cool, but like, it's not cool like in a fun way, but a cool like conspiracy way.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I just thought of that one actually a couple weeks ago, but that's actually, or no, a psychic got me thinking about that. I was watching that Irish psychic chick. She was kind of talking about that.
It's so strange.
There's got to be something to it because we're never-ending energy. That's why you can't be an atheist, because your energy never ends.
And like when people die,
It
they'll
goes
weigh the
somewhere.
body before they die,
Uh-huh.
and after they die, there's like a specific amount that the body weighs less.
Oh, is there?
And people think that that is like the soul left.
Not the shit that comes out of them after they themselves afterwards.
Maybe. Maybe it's both.